4 minutes early, but we have a couple clips, so we're going to start 4 minutes early. Stephen, since you're standing up, good to see you. I would have done it too. Let me know. I would like to be in the club. We open us in a word of prayer. You didn't want to say Sunday school hour? Last week, we continued this idea of dealing with the skeptics or answering the skeptics. We were careful not to use the idea of answering the skeptics with the word, because if the word mattered to them, they wouldn't be skeptics, but you answer the skeptics by the word, because it still is the word, which is the power of God unto salvation. And so we spent a little time there. We went to Acts 17. We could have gone to Acts 26, but we would still be just reading the passage. So we went to Acts 17, where Paul gives us a great model for this dialogue of dealing with the skeptic. 3 things. I'm going to throw these out again. Justin, you'll remember we said attitude is extremely important. The attitude is to be respectful, it's to be humble, it's to be loving. If you want people to pay attention to you, that definitely ought to be the presentation. And more than that, if you're there, your approach is not to pick a fight, it's not to win, it's not to make somebody bad or wrong, it's to bring change, well, then there should be love and there should be humility. Because third thing, you should be able to associate with them. There is, I'm just one beggar. Okay, well then why don't we act like it? Why are we so aggressive? Why are we so ugly? Why is the thing we need to do is find a 16-year-old and say, pull up your pants? Well, what he needs is Jesus, and then he'll pull up his pants. Why do we find the group of people who are living together and say, well, the first thing you need to do is separate? Well, if you separate, now you fix things, why do you need Jesus? We sometimes confuse things on our own. And so we start with this approach of associating, finding a point of contact. And then the third thing was you need to be informed. I'll do that. I'll do that later. We need to be informed, which is why we're taking time out here to do this. Now, we rolled from there. Part of why we need to be informed is because you can't even talk about what's real anymore, what's true. For 20 years, we kind of had this idea of, well, all truth is relative, and all the answers were the same. But Joel, the answers are, all truth is relative. Well, that's not a relative statement, and that was kind of our only discourse. And there was just this picking a fight. And there was nowhere to go anywhere with it. And Miss Pat, it's a real problem because relative thought then just bloomed and took over, and we don't even recognize it. In fact, today, and I made this proposal, I don't even think so much the push of thought is where truth is relative. It's all feeling-based. It's emotional-based. And I pulled these clips. I can't remember what order they're in because I gave them to Eric last week. Obviously, we didn't get there. I pulled these clips. This idea of emotional or feeling-based truth began really in the early 70s. It's been something we've been fighting with since creation, but it began to be pushed and kind of accepted. It began to be in movies and on TV shows and in songs really in the early 70s. In fact, we use this clip because it's one of the most popular movies of all time. Eric, you got those 2 Star Wars clips?
I suggest you try it again, Luke.
Right, now hold up. Let's set this up.
Your
Luke is trying to learn to use his lightsaber, and he can't hit a thing. Now here's going to be the answer. Vision, sight, what is concrete, that's not what's real. If we close your eyes and you can't see, and you just go by your feelings, Luke, go ahead.
Yourself and act on instinct.
With the blast shield down, I can't even see. How am I supposed to fight?
Your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them.
Don't trust them. And now, of course, he does better. Eric, stop it.
Stretch
If I
out
wanted
with
to,
your
I'd
feet.
really pick a fight because I would have gone to Disney, and we'd go earlier than this, and we'd start Jiminy Cricket and Following Your Heart. But we could stay right in this movie. The key point in this entire movie is when Luke is flying down the little channel, and everybody else has gotten shot. And here it goes. Luke, trust the Force. Turn off the computer and all logic and everything else that's supposed to guarantee success, and feel your way through life. And most popular movie of all time. Still being released today. Somewhere this year, that'll be released in a movie theater, and people will pay 10, 12 bucks, whatever it is, to go watch it. It has become very much just as part of how we view and examine truth. Well, Ephesians 2, just how do you feel about that? What do you feel Paul meant when he wrote that? It's how we say it. It's not, what did Paul mean by that? What is God saying here? It's what do you feel he's saying? And I'll give you, this is a clip. It's from 2019. And it's a political clip. But I want you to see it. It's Katie Tur is interviewing Michael Wolff about the book he had written about the Trump White House. And in this book, he quotes multiple people who worked for Trump who supposedly said these things because they're quoted, directly quoted. And as soon as the book came out, dozens of them said, I don't know what that is. I never said that. And so in the interview, Katie Kerr brings this up. It's about a minute and a half long. Maybe it's a little bit longer than that, which is why we started early. And you'll see he comes back to, it'll get to this point. Well, as a journalist, don't you have tapes and recordings and notes? Don't you have evidence? Yes, I have evidence. Well, why don't you release the evidence? Here's my evidence. It's the book. Read it. If it feels true to you, then it's true. This is a bestseller. Go ahead, Eric.
Michael Wolff, author of Fire and Fury, Inside the Trump White House, is back with me. Michael, some folks are saying that what they said in this book are not true. You quote Mick Mulvaney in the book. You talk about how he had to be introduced a number of times to the president as the director of the Office of Management and Budget. And in Mulvaney's telling, according to you, Trump was too scattershot to ever be of much help to him in trying to craft a budget. He was asked about that in an interview, and here's what he said.
The businessman of multi-million dollar business.
I talked to the guy for about half an hour. I remember talking to him in March. I think he put 2 sentences about me in the book, both of which were inaccurate.
Folks out there who are disputing with
I hadn't heard that before, and I just, want to say that's completely ridiculous.
Well, Tom Barrack is saying that he's misquoted. Katie Walsh is saying she's misquoted. Are they all lying?
They are all lying. I mean, they are all, they're in a situation, we're in a situation now where Donald Trump has come to think that this book is a mortal threat. I don't know if it is or it isn't, but he certainly feels that way. And he is making demands on everybody. I hear through the grapevine, that Katie Walsh's job is at issue now, and which I regret. And even that, she's not really saying that I misquoted her. She's saying that she was quoting something like she was quoting Steve Bannon, who said he's a child. Huh. Everybody says he's a child, in fact. So we're having, people are scrambling and they are panicked, which I absolutely understand. Nobody saw this book coming. Nobody saw that it would be as big as it seems to be, and everybody is caught, a deer caught in the headlights.
You have tapes. Are you going to release the tapes?
No, I'm going to do, I have what every journalist, I work like every journalist. I have tapes, I have notes.
But if people are questioning it, why not produce the evidence?
Because that's not I'm not in your business. My evidence is the book. Read the book. If it makes sense to you, if it strikes a chord, if it rings true, it is true.
Here's the thing about the book, and I read it.
Eric, stop it. She's about to go into this discourse, which is great. Well, I wrote my own book, and back, it's pathetic. Not because it has anything to do with Trump, because it has anything to do with our elections, or because it has everything to do with how we decide how and where and when we're going to live life. You see, I'm going to tell you that has become the gospel for every young person. Try to talk to a young man. See, let's talk about I always talk about young girls. I don't know why I do that, three boys. Try to go talk to a young man about whether he should marry this person or that person. Try to do it. Bring up, oh, well, she hates her parents and she's rebellious and she. Joe, you know what the answer is going to be? And it just, when I'm with her, it feels right. Truth was at one point something we all believed was discovered. It's out there. There is a vein. You seek it. You find it. Okay? And when it's true, it will work. But it has switched to truth as a feeling. And if it feels good, if it's working, it must be true. Everything works for a little while. That crazy marriage will work for a little while. Brother Jeremy, if you go by that, people are going to be looking for perfect spouses and no one will ever get married. No, I understand that there are no perfect spouses. This is what I want. I want a commitment to truth. I want a commitment to the fact that it must be discovered. Because then when problems come, we don't do what we feel like. We search. Okay, and that's where you get to, man, I'm not trying to jump in on your territory, but it's just, Eric, which verse did I give you? I gave you Ephesians. How about Ephesians? Ephesians 4:32. Oh, you can go to 1 Corinthians 13. We can go there every single Sunday. Bearing all things, believing all things, hoping all things, enduring all things. Now, when it feels like quitting, how does that work? If you search for truth. Because love should, hope, endure, bear, believe. There's no quit in those verses. Okay, or what about, well, Joel Preston, he's just the meanest guy in the whole wide world. You do not understand how much he's offended me. I just can't. Well, what about Ephesians 4, where we're supposed to be kind one to another? We're supposed to be tenderhearted. We're supposed to forgive one another. And it even gives us a measure. As compared to how Christ forgave us, so he's holding those 2 or 3 things against us forever, we're supposed to forgive. You see, you're right. Miss Lorraine, you are right. There are worse things than not being married in this life. Being in a bad marriage is worse than not being married. And I want every young person to know that. But I also want them to know how great it is to be in a marriage. As long as you're committed to truth. You're committed to discovering truth, not to feelings. Because feelings lie, and they change, and they're almost never right. How do you know? It feels good. Why are you quitting? Why are you running? Why are you divorcing? Why are you? Feelings. This isn't out there. It has become the gospel truth inside the church, which is really scary when you consider 2 verses in Proverbs. We're just going to look at one of them since they say the exact same thing. Proverbs 14:2. He that walketh in his uprightness feareth the Lord, but he that is perverse in his ways despiseth him. We could have gone here. There is a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof is death. It feels good. It's going to end in destruction. It's not about feelings. So, and I'll do this too. Well, Doc, this is where, Jeremy, we all know that you're wasting time here in Sunday school. Let's just get on. We all know that truth is discovered. Well, I'll give you this. If we knew that truth was discovered, we'd be spending time searching for it. I've been accused of presenting lessons like I know everything. But let me tell you where that comes from. I know I don't know anything. And so I search for it. Now what I find in there, I will defend as if it's truth. Because it is. Teachers, you know what? If we believe truth is discovered, we're searching how can I affect the student. principles. How can I deal with the school? How can I affect this family? How can I? If we are not searching for truth, then we're deceiving ourselves when we say, I believe truth is discovered. Matt, how am I going to be a good dad? How am I going to be a good husband? Truth is discovered. The answers are there. If it's true, it will work, right? So then how much time do we spend searching for truth? Or do we believe that I can just go by my feelings because I'm smart enough to? Oh, how scary. How scary for such important things. I'm going to run out of time. I have not passed the first. I haven't put the first page down there. And God, I feel like half of my life, this has actually been what I've been fighting for. I don't know if you'll remember, but the very first time I ever spoke here, which is over 20 years ago, Joe, I don't even know if you were here. You might have been. We spoke on truth and the battle for truth. And anytime you go in here, usually this becomes the easy out. When you start talking about we should be informed, we should be ready. Stephen, I want you to understand, your boys are going to go to school someday. There is going to be a professor who will have every opportunity to influence them. They better be ready for some of these attacks. They're going to go to work where the entire work model is built by a professor somewhere who taught somebody who graduated from somewhere. They better be able to handle some of this or it will create doubt. And when you bring it up, Donnie usually becomes, well, I know you should be informed in the Bible, be ready to give every man an answer, and I got it. But really, I believe my testimony. No, I believe every person should have a testimony that is able to be used, which means it's something we need to protect. We need to develop, we need to grow, we need to invest in. But a testimony is only an evidence. Faith, remember, goes beyond the evidence. You can't prove faith, but faith is based upon something. There are some evidences. We need to know those evidence. Faith goes beyond the evidence. The more evidence you know, the stronger the evidence, the stronger the faith is going to be. And so, testimony is important. But I can find you somebody who's going to tell you, my life turned around the minute I quit caring about others and what they thought. I can find you somebody that said, well, I went to prison and I found Allah and my life has been better ever since. I can find you somebody that says, I just gave up on all that church stuff I was growing up in, and as soon as I started doing this, and this, life became better. Testimony is vitally important. It is an evidence. It's not winning evidence. And we need to be prepared to deal with some of these things. Now, so, we've talked about a few of them. It's been 3-4 weeks. I'm not sure how long. We've talked about a few of them. I'm going to throw out 2 really fast in 5 minutes. Preacher style, when he's already been up there 40 minutes and he's going to go through 5 points. And just so you can think about them. And then I want to talk a little bit about what the great challenge is. And that's the problem of evil. Because I think that is huge, not only in answering out there, but I think that's huge for us in how we make our own decisions, how we view our own relationship with God. But we've talked about the Bible. We've talked about the life of Christ. There are 2 other great arguments. Those 2 are more important for me, so that's why we spent time in those 2. But the 2 other arguments are intelligent design and basically reason. Again, quickly, we're going to start this way. Eric, just so I'm going to speed this up. Give me the Albert Einstein quote, yeah. Albert Einstein was an agnostic most of his life. By the time he died, he was a theist. He was not a Christian, but he was a theist because he could not understand some things. What he couldn't understand is if the world came from chaos, if it just came by chance, if this complex thing that he was studying just came that way, why does it follow rules? Why can't he use math to find out things about mass and length and time? How does this work? Because you can't have organization and logic from chaos. And he called that the incomprehensible comprehensibility of creation, of nature. And this is probably one of his most famous. The most incomprehensible thing about the world is that it is comprehensible. It makes no sense. It makes no sense that I can find out these things if it didn't have a designer, which is why he became a theist. Because you just can't get that from chance. And that is the basic underlying thought behind intelligent design. And then there's just lots of evidences on top of that. A lot of them. But I'm going to tell you where this really challenges and where it flows is because it has an issue with Newton's third law. Give me Newton's third law. Newton's third law tells us that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. When you were in science class in whatever, I did it in sixth grade. I don't know when they do it now. But when you were in science class in sixth grade, they dropped a marble on this side. It went down here and it came up here. No matter what you did, that marble's never going to come up higher than you dropped it from. Because the reaction, the action will never go further than the cause. So that was his issue. How if this is chaos, how can it become logic? How can it go further? How can it make more? Now, if you take that same thought and you take it into just a philosophical reason debate, it goes into the same place. How can our desires, how can the reality that we live in crave reason, crave logic, crave understanding, crave answers if we live in a world that wasn't created, that just kind of blew out there? How do we crave reason if there is no reason? How do we crave morality if there is no morality? How do we crave purpose and meaning in life if there is no purpose and meaning? If life is all meaningless, how do we crave and why do we want meaning? Why do we want love? Why do we want justice? Because you can't outrun the cause. The effect will never outrun the cause. And if God's the cause, creator, boom, then it makes sense. Now it makes sense. I have a personal God like me. I have a rational God like me. I have a moral God like me. I have a loving God like me. Now, biblically, I would say I'm like him. And he's perfect, and he's infinite, and he's loving to the infinite degree. But I am created in his image. Now, Justin, if we take that, it makes sense. If you don't, philosophically, you run things to the end. There is no sense. The world does not make sense. Creation, where we live, reality does not make sense. So why in all of this picture, with all of these things that we've really spent some time in, we didn't spend any time in those, but why do we live in a world where truth is scoffed at and mocked? And the biggest challenge is the problem of evil. That's where we struggle. Because what I'm going to say is that I have a God who's all good, all knowing, all powerful, and yet there's evil. Here, Eric, let's go through these slides real quick. Oof. You can tell I did that from my phone. I'm going to say we have an all-knowing God. If we have an all-knowing God, Stephen, he would know that evil exists. Yes? All-knowing would have to know. 2, we have an all-loving God. If we have an all-knowing God, he knows evil exists, and he's all-loving, he would want to stop evil. Right? All-knowing, all-loving, knows there's evil, he would want to stop evil. An all-powerful God, he can. Right? But, 4th, checkmate, evil does exist. Therefore, he is either not all-knowing, not all-powerful, or not all-loving. He either knows it exists but can't do anything about it, knows it exists but doesn't care, or cares and could, but he's out there in cosmic land and doesn't know. And there's the argument. The argument is, there is evil. How can there be a God? I'll give you this week. Eric, you got that Chris Pratt thing? Actor Chris Pratt seeks new deity to replace God. For years, Chris Pratt has had an extremely strong testimony in Hollywood. In fact, they have tried to cancel him and shut him down because he has a very clear and strong testimony. You read this and a couple other articles. Here's the problem. All of Hollywood and all of the attacks on the outside could do nothing to him. You know what he's struggling with? The problem of evil. There still must be a God. He's still very much a theist. It's just, how do I make this work with my Christianity and thinking that God is love and God is... And I'm going to tell you, okay, well, that's Chris Pratt. That's Hollywood. No, that's your daughter. That's my son. That's the world we live in. And we better talk about evil. If it doesn't make sense to them before somebody else gets to them, what they say will fill that vacuum. And I don't know if you looked around our congregation. It's pretty old. I'm going to tell you, because that's what's happening. If you don't fill the vacuum, someone else will. And that vacuum created enough doubt that a guy who's been being blasted for almost a decade for his Christianity caved. Evil can create enough doubt to make people fall. I'm going to throw these two things out. I'm just throwing them out fast because I want to get into it. Here we go. First, two thoughts, and I'm not spending much time here. We got to keep this in mind. The whole idea of evil goes this way. Doc, it goes this way. How can a loving God allow an innocent 2-year-old to be taken away in a tornado? That's a terrible picture, but it has a bad assumption. It uses the word innocent, and there is none innocent in this world. We are all sinners, and in the end, sin brings death. And so the very assumption makes it an area that you really can't go down and argue, because we're not agreeing on apples and apples. Two, most of the time when this stuff is thrown out, here you go. When this is thrown out, what about the problem of evil? It's the Darwinian atheist who's throwing it out. Okay, so it's the guy who's telling you that truth is relative and it revolves around the person, and I can't tell you what's right or what's wrong. There is no right or wrong. It's all developed inside of you and what you... Now, how is anything evil? How can a Darwinian mess throw out the problem of evil since they don't believe that there is any design or there is any right way? It all just happens. But since I do believe in a purpose, a design, and in a right way, I have to talk about evil, and I have to be able to explain it to Eric and Jade and Jonathan and Jessica and Angela and Casey and Rob. And when I look at evil, this is the approach I use. And we're going to see where we end up. First, begins this way. And you have to ask this. What was God's aim in creation? And I think we can answer that. God's aim in creation is love. 1 John 4:7, God is love, right? Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loveth is of God and knoweth God. He is love. We could stay in that chapter. We go 3 verses. Here it is. What do we know about God? God is love. He is loving. He is love. Now, Matthew 22:37. What's the greatest commandment? That we love God. Second's like first, that we love our neighbor as ourselves. How about 1 John 4:19? We love him because he first loved us. Now, here we go. Here's my throw out statement. Here's my hypothesis that scientifically we're going to try to look at and come up with some evidence. God's whole purpose is love. And I'm gonna do this first. Joe, I don't know why people want to argue with that. No, I mean, really, I don't know why. Not trying to win an argument, just I don't know why. You know how much hope that gives me? We love him because he first loved us. Love begets love. You know what love does? It reproduces itself. God is loving. Because he's loving, he did what loving does, and he produced more love. We were produced to love. The greatest commandment is that we love. So the greatest purpose must be that we love. Justin, if my son and I have a terrible relationship, you know how much hope that just gives me? Love begets love. I just need to love him more. Now we're going to get into he's a free agent, and he can make those decisions just like we can. And God loved us and created us in love for love. But that gives me hope that if I just love him, it might produce love. If I'm struggling with my spouse, if I love, it might produce love. You know, we really try to win the argument. Doesn't produce love. Far from it. God, out of his love, created the world. He didn't need the world. He wasn't lonely. Love loves to multiply. Love loves to love. Love produces love. That's our purpose. We've actually even been invited to participate in this God-loving relationship for all eternity. One of my favorite passages in all the Bible is John 17. Eric, did I give you John 17? I did give you John 17. John 17. I in them and thou in me, that they may be perfect in one, and that the world may know that thou hast sent me, and hast loved them as thou hast loved me. Father, I will that they also whom thou hast given me be with me where I am, that they may behold my glory, which thou hast given me, for thou lovest me before the foundation of the world. Oh, that's too far. Here you go. You love me, Father, I love you, and you've given me them, and I want to bring them from where they are to where we are, that we can love. Now, that is a wonderful picture. That also has problems. Because the only way you can have love is to have the choice not to love. Joel, I was going to do this. I popped in my head Wednesday as soon as I saw you. I was going to sit right here, wait for you to walk in the door, then do this big picture thing about how I'm so glad to see you, which I am, by the way. And I truly can say this. I love Joel Preston. I believe that Joel Preston and I could see each other one day every 10 years, and there's a like mind, there's a kindred there. Joe, I don't know when last time I saw you, but I'll tell you, I love Joel Preston. And I think that will maintain as long as we're both still trying to discover truth. Now, we're very different. You know, it's like 64 colors in the Crayola box. We're not the same. But we search for truth, and that just makes this link. And I believe that's what's being talked about there in John 17. But I was going to take it to this place and just go a little bit further. And so I'm so glad to see on Facebook and see that your kids are doing well, and see that your wife's doing well, and see that because God blesses obedience. Because that sounds good, doesn't it? You know what I just said, though? I just said it must be true because it worked. It's the opposite of saying it's true, so it will work. I tried to back into it, and if we're not careful, I want you to see how prevalent that is. We can mix things up. Well, but that is a true. Yes, but I didn't base it on truth. I based it on the fact that it was working.
Unconditional love. And I never thought of that before, because some of the people that will come into my tent and want to say God has unconditional love, but that's not true. tells about how he judges the third and fourth generation of those that hate him and showeth mercy unto those that love him.
You are talking about my struggle as a 10-year-old kid. And I'm going to tell you, here's where I spent a lot of time searching to deal with that. And that's where it comes into. Is God love? God is love. We're created for love. But love requires freedom. If you're going to choose love, you have to be free to choose not to love. And, you know, anytime you talk about freedom, by the way, we get that all messed up. Today, people are denying their freedom as they're exercising it every minute. I'm not free. You know, freedom means enablement and no consequences, not freedom, but freedom has consequences. Freedom is the right to choose. Think about this. How am I going to do this? See, I had this all nice and orderly, but we're going to have to jump ahead with the illustration. So, Joel, let's say that I could create a computer chip. We're not going to put it in the scene. I'm just going to be able to blow it. Let's say I can create a computer chip, and I can blow it into Miss Angie's ear and make her I'm about to say make her the best wife. Make her, I don't know. No, you're going to blow it in Miss Janine's ear and make her the best wife, because Angie already is. She watches once in a while. And what that means is you're going to come home, and she's going to be wearing the perfect outfit, and she's going to have cooked the perfect meal, and she's going to say the perfect things, and everything's going to be wonderful. For about 10 years, you're going to be okay with that. But after that, sooner or later, you're going to realize that is because she's an automaton. It's not her loving you, it's you loving you. You're controlling it. She's a complex puppet. That's not love. Well, he wanted love. So he created us for love, which means we have to have choice. And if you have choice, it gives the possibility of evil. She might choose something else. You might come home one day and she's wearing a Pittsburgh Penguin jersey instead of a Philadelphia Flyer jersey. Because you wouldn't let one be in the house, but okay. Decisions are meaningful when you have the opportunity to choose something else. And and this gets into God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Did God give him opportunity because he hardened Pharaoh's heart? And I do love the great picture that Wilmington used to use all the time. You know the nature of things. God is all-knowing. He knows the nature of things. If you shine sunlight on snow, what does it do? Melts. You shine sunlight on clay, what does it do? It hardens. He knows the nature of Pharaoh's heart. The same sun melts the snow, hardens the clay. I do like that picture, but there are some things that you only can do the evidence and then go beyond. And the evidence here, God created us for love, which means he gave us freedom. But in that freedom, he gave us choice. Now, we can choose to go against God. And when we choose to go against God, it creates problems. Now, I got 5 minutes, so I need to do this quick. There are some rules for when you choose to go against God. And this, I think, is where we cause our problems. Joe, I can choose to go against God, but the Bible's going to tell me, be sure my sin will find me out. It's going to tell my sin has consequences. Well, we tend to paint this as a picture of we got the cosmic cop up there who's bashing us on the head. But no, he created a creation that has rules. And when you go against him, there are consequences to going against him. He doesn't have to sit up there and bash you on the head. The consequences, sin, when it is finished, every time will bring forth death. He's not deciding to bring forth death. You decided to bring forth death. So that gets to the place where we're talking about, well, what about God's will, and are we going against God's will? And can we be stronger than him if we're allowed to go against God's will? If it's God's will that all be saved, right? Right? It's God's will that all be saved. But we're not all saved, right? So then are we stronger than God's will? Okay. Let me give you this picture. Every teacher, every coach, every parent understands what this is. In fact, any person who's ever had any authority understands what it is to have something that is both in your will and against your will. I raised 3 boys. Well, let's do it this way. Mom raised 3 boys. Okay? It's her desire that they always clean their room and the house is always clean. It is. Her will is that the house is always clean. If you go over and visit Josh and Katie's right now, it's probably not up to her will. They're not here. But Joel, she knows growing up that she couldn't stand over them all the time. She wants Josh to be able to make a decision that that is important. It is her will that he is mature and decides that this is important. That is what her will is. And so her will allows him to have a dirty house because she wants him to have the choice. Yes, it's his will that we all be saved. But he gives us the choice because it's about love. Now here's where it is. Well, but he's not unconditional. Well, he gives everyone the choice no matter what or who or where. But his justice has set rules. Sin brings forth death. Now we got 2 minutes. I messed this all up, so let me just do this. And I messed up all them verses, Eric. Even Eric just shut it off. If all this is true, and it is true, Justin, I'm going to tell you, this world has bombarded us so much. We don't even realize how often the philosophy of the world has penetrated our thought. And it is causing us struggles in how we make our own decisions. I could not cry loud enough or enough times that we would understand the importance of seeking and to discover truth, that it might wash our minds clean. Putting someone else first, the essence of love, never makes sense to the self, to the flesh. Forgiving never makes sense to self, to the flesh. You know, we're talking about evil. We could get into a bigger picture where you talk about, okay, well, that's why God allows Hitler, but why is there tornadoes and why is there natural evil? We live in a cursed world. You know, this world is not what it was supposed to be. Neither is man. I'll give you something. I'll give you something to go. Okay, I'm not behind here. I'm over here. Just something. Let's talk about it at lunchtime. It's not something I'm going to stand on as dogma. But we were created to have dominion over. We were created to have dominion over the earth. Dogma. What does that mean? Joe, you ever think about this? When Jesus walked on the water, that might not have been his God power. That might have been his full man power. Dominion over the earth. What does that mean? He created the earth to answer to us. I don't exactly know what that means. I do know this. I do know the whole earth has a ruler over it, and it's not man anymore. He's the God of this world. He's the ruler in this air. And he'll do anything he can to cause conflict and twist things. So, you want to talk about why we have natural evil? Because everything's a mess. It's not the way it's supposed to be. But we have a God who loves us and has made a way and will promise in return and bring us back and wants us to share in that love for all eternity. And that's where we need to spend our time studying and looking and teaching. Anyway, Joel, it is good to see you. And I did word prayer.